I also have a question to Rabbi Singer. Satan is an angel of the Eternal One and does only what the Eternal One commands him to do. In Christianity, he is seen as a fallen angel. Ezekiel 28 is used for this. This is about the king of Tyre, who was never in Gan Eden. Who is the cherub of Ezekiel?
Okay, so this is really important. So just in context, Ezekiel 28 doesn't begin, the story doesn't begin there. The king of Tyre, Hiram, is so important that he actually gets quite a few chapters in Ezekiel. Goes all the way back to 26. He's in Isaiah, he's in Jeremiah, he's a very big deal. Now, why is he a big deal? I can't go into now because it'll take up all the time. But the thing about Hiram was that he was an enormously successful man who was, and it's a dynasty of these men who became kings, who made magnificent palaces for themselves. They were tremendously wealthy through mercantile, and the great-grandfather, helped build the first temple, provided the cedar from Lebanon. They had shipping, so they were able to bring in trees that don't grow here in Israel, but grow in the north. And he was involved in it, even in something so. But he became arrogant, and that was the nature of the family. So the nature of the king of Tyre is that you think you're so great, that you think you're a god. You're not a god, but you're only a man. That's how the whole chapter begins. So what's happening is that Hiram was arrogant, and he made himself like a god and made for himself grand palaces. He made for himself a palace that was on stilts in the water, that was above the water, fantastic palaces for himself. And his heart grew arrogant. He demanded certain cities in Israel as compensation for the assistance, and he wasn't satisfied with the cities he was offered. It's a whole deal with him, okay? So what happens is, because he was arrogant, the prophet addresses him with arrogant questions, meaning questions that demean him. And these are questions, not statements. You have to dial it back. And when we go in, he says, you're a man, and v'lo el, you're a man and you're not a god. That was the whole point. That's verse 2. And verse 3, it's a whole series of questions. Hine chacham ata mi Daniel? So that could be translated two ways. You are as wise as Daniel. Daniel's a prophet, right? But it doesn't say you are as wise as Daniel. You can really read it, but you need to put a question mark at the end. So, are you as wise as Daniel? The Christian Bibles on that one get it correctly. But afterwards, if you go further in verse 7 and 8, again, he's asking all sorts of questions. Are you this? Do you have, roofs made out of pearls and sapphire? So therefore, what we have is questions upon questions. Are you and that's look at verse 9. Verse 9, the text says, Timer el kim ani lifnei haregcha. Do you think you're a god? Will you think you're still a god in front of the ones who will kill you? Right? That's a question. And what are these questions? They're all they're all loaded questions to demean a man who is filled with arrogance. And therefore, 13, 14, 15, these passages are all, did you walk in you have to put a question mark there. You walked in the Garden of Eden? So the theme, it's hitting a Cassandra here in Ezekiel 28. And that is, you think you're a god? You think you're so great? Are you going to still think you're so smart when there's a man named Daniel who is noted for his being a genius? Will you still run around saying that you're a god in front of those who are going to take your life? We'll see how you act then. So all of this is the language to demean. So he asked the question, were you in the Garden of Eden? Was your covering every precious stone? But the thing is, So you could say you walked in the Garden of Eden. It's a sentence. Or you could say you walked in the Garden of Eden. There's a question mark there. So that's what's happening. So now the reason why the texts are using such lofty examples is because he really could have become something. He could have made something of himself. He really did get close. I mean, he was involved in the construction of the temples. He was very involved in the building of the state of Israel. He was Israel's best friend. And you might then figure out why God put these chapters in the Bible. Why is Tyre important to us? Could it be the Bible is describing a nation who would emerge as the wealthiest nation in the world, the most powerful nation in the world, and most powerful nation because of its great wealth, and would become Israel's best friend, but one day demand that Israel give up its cities? You were so close. You were the first president to vote for a state of Israel after it was pronounced by Ben-Gurion. You were so high up. You were so great. But you became arrogant. You could figure out now, I think you're beginning to figure out, why are these chapters in the Bible? Why is this important to us? Because nations start off as friends of Israel, and then they become arrogant and demand Israel make concessions that's not for the Jews to give up. God gave this land to the Jewish people. So therefore, these are all a statement of contempt, utter contempt for a nation that was very wealthy, that was very mighty, the world's superpower, and yet fell down from the highest potential and crashed. And it's in the Bible because there'd be another nation that would make the same mistake, or possibly make the same mistake, and the message is don't become like that guy.